As an immigration lawyer with so much tremendous experience invested in artificial intelligence, developing the technology of the future, and really focusing on permanent residency, citizenship, you have so much knowledge. The big question I have to you is, how likely are immigrants moving to Canada now to get permanent residency?
Well, it's definitely an interesting time, Max, because as someone who's been following Express Entry since almost the beginning, right? The program started in 2017. It's probably been one of the most confusing times to navigate the program, right? Before COVID, it used to be a simple every 2 weeks, we do a draw, here's the score, all program draw. Now what we've moved to is a couple things ever since COVID. Number one, industry-specific draws, right? So the government has said, we're going to pick certain industries, certain knock codes, certain things like French-speaking abilities, and we're gonna do draws based on that. Now the difficulty for that is we don't really know yet, because we haven't seen a ton of draws, which ones they're prioritizing and when.
It's clear the government wants certain people to become permanent residents over others. The lucky ones work in healthcare, STEM, trades like construction workers, transport, agriculture and agri-food, and also French speakers. If you look at the numbers, people in these fields have the lowest requirements for permanent residency. Later in this video, we will give you exactly what you need to qualify for PR, but now it's important we speak about documents. Erica, when it comes to PR, the most important element is documents. How do you make sure that our clients submit proper documents? And what documents take the most time?
So in order to ensure that they submit the correct documents and all of the correct documents, that's where the customized required document list comes in. And that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna create that for them. And there's two stages when we're talking about PR. I like to be proactive and gather most of the documents up front, right at the beginning of the process to make sure we're all ready to go. But in terms of which take the longest to get, definitely the two that you have to be thinking about, sometime before you're ready to apply is police certificates and also educational credential assessment reports. There's various designated companies that you can work with to get your ECA, but in terms of timing, I'd say you want to get on that as soon as possible. With the police certificate, you need to think about it, but also not be too proactive because police certificates do expire. So you have to keep that in mind. They're only valid for 6 months after you get them. But if it's for a location that you haven't traveled to since you got the police certificate, that's fine. We can submit an expired police certificate. And also it's important to keep in mind as well that IRCC is kind in allowing us to submit the PR application with proof that we have requested the police certificate, because there is this recognition of the fact that it does take some time to get the police certificates. So we do have that option to be able to go ahead, especially when we're talking about express entry, because we only have 60 days from the moment that we receive the ITA before we submit the PR application.
So you better be ready before you start.
Exactly.
Let's look into the future. There is tremendous pressure on politicians due to housing. It's becoming extremely unaffordable, and it's so symbolic that we're here in Toronto where housing market is through the roof. I'm talking global standards across the planet, not just in Canada. How do you think this pressure will play out in immigration? Will politicians cap international students and permanent residents?
I don't know. It's a great question. The conversation is really just starting. We're starting to hear rumblings. You might know better than most as you like to have great conversations with these people. There's rumblings about capping international students. There's rumblings about maybe a two-tiered system with DLIs and stuff like that. I think what we will probably see is more conservative numbers coming out in terms of estimates and targets and things like that until housing can become a little bit more under control. Will they do that as much at the PR level or more on the temporary level like with students? It's hard to say. I think if you look at the numbers over the last 5 years, the number of international students has really ballooned, right? So I think what they might want to do is refocus a little bit, recalibrate. Let's get the students that are already here to become permanent residents, right? So they can settle and hopefully complete their journey in Canada. But it's hard to say, right? Which one might they do? I hope what they do is go to the root of the problem and actually start not blaming this problem on the international students, right? It is Canada and the government and the schools that brought them here and welcomed them with open arms, and now all of a sudden are shifting focus and saying, no, we don't want as many, right? Let's look to the core problem. Let's make it easier and more affordable for developers to build more houses. because we do have the room, right? And we have accepted these students, so let's try to help them settle.
Let's say I have a bachelor's back home in China, but in Canada I got a master's degree. Do I need my bachelor's from China?
Technically, you are only getting points for your highest degree, so really, I suppose no, but for the sake of completion, I always like to say it's better to be safe than sorry. So sure, let's get that ECA for your bachelor's degree. It also goes to show too that you are eligible for receiving your master's degree in Canada, and it just allows us to provide IRCC with the most complete application package that we can.
Let's say that even for STEM professionals, the cutoff has been what, 480, 488, which is pretty high. Picking up French can increase your chances.
The real question, if I can reword it, is can you score high enough in French to be eligible through that stream, right? There's actually two benefits. Number one is if you score high enough in French, you get bonus points, period, for express entry, right? So even in something like an all-program draw, that might bump you up to what you need. It may also make you eligible for the French-speaking industry-specific draw, which is huge, right, if you can get invited. I learned core French up until grade 9. I'm born and raised in Canada. I'm terrible with language. I would say it highly depends on how good you are at learning languages and, quite frankly, how committed you might be, right? If anybody really puts their mind into it for 10, 12 months, especially not just learning French, but learning French for the purpose of scoring well on the TCF or the TEF, right? The two tests that are accepted by IRCC through express entry, then it could be a great way to, get your way in through that route.
If I'm applying for PR, I need to show money. How much money do I need to show?
Right, so firstly, it depends on which category you're applying under. So if you are applying under the Canadian Experience class, you actually don't need to show proof of funds, which is helpful. But if you're applying under the Federal Skilled Worker Program, you are going to have to show proof of funds. And IRCC provides a very helpful chart online in terms of showing how much you need to show. And this would depend on the dependents that you are bringing.
Yeah, we have the chart on the screen right now, so you can go through it.
Exactly, yeah, and
perfect.
so you want to make sure that you follow this, but as always, more is better. So this is the minimum, use this as a baseline.
Many of our viewers are either considering Ontario or they live in Ontario. Who is this province good for in terms of getting PR? Who is it bad for?
Well, the two things I would say is, again, number one, look at the PNPs. All it takes is a quick Google, Ontario PNP, go to the ontario.ca website. Ontario does have a fair amount of different PNP streams, but their website does do a pretty good job of breaking down the requirements of the, for example, job offer streams, employer-based streams, it's entrepreneurial streams, et cetera, et cetera. The second thing I would do is get a good sense for the job market in Ontario or whatever province you're living in. Because if you can make yourself very valuable to a certain employer, that might make it easier to get something like an LMIA, which is a huge boost in terms of points for express entry.
Do you see many employers jumping through hoops to get that?
It really depends. I think it really depends on industry. If it's an industry or an occupation that is not that in demand, you will have a very hard time convincing an employer to jump through hoops to get something like an LMIA.
What industries are you speaking with? Can you be more specific?
Yeah, I think the ones that we've certainly done a lot of work with are in tech, are in trades, are in construction, different areas of trades.
If you have a great relationship with your employer, they can really help boost your PR profile by doing what's called labor market impact assessment with PR support. Though not many have that great relationship to ask for legal challenges on the employer side. This is why I wanted to ask Josh how this could be overcome.
Take a look at the job market, right? If it's something that has been struggling or is struggling, the interesting thing about the job offer is, number one, if you can get an LMIA, awesome, 50 points minimum for express entry. But number two is, for some of the PNP streams, they do not require an LMIA. They do require a job offer, but compared to the process of asking your employer to go through the LMIA process, which can quite frankly be a pain in the ass, some streams, like some employer job offer streams in Ontario, just require that your employer meet a few criteria and fill out one or two forms. That's a much easier ask than having the employer go through the LMIA and paying for the LMIA process. So keep that in mind as well.
We recently received great news. Our client got an invitation to apply for PR. Results like this is the reason why I keep going. Though, as not everyone can afford a lawyer to apply on their behalf, I asked Erica about our PR review service and the best way you can apply completely on your own.
When you apply with lawyers like us, one of the biggest benefits is the cover letter that communicates directly to the visa officer that you write for our clients. What if they want to do it themselves? They don't have that lawyer to make a cover letter. How can they position themselves for PR best?
So in terms of if they want to go about it themselves, we do offer review services. So as part of that service, I wouldn't be the one helping them write any letters of explanations, but specifically the letter that would come from me if we were doing a full representation service, but I would help review it, and I can provide some comments and suggestions, any areas that I feel would be helpful to change. But the biggest one I see when I'm reading somebody's cover letter or letter of explanation that I didn't personally work on, my number one recommendation is headings. Break it down, make it easy to read, cut the letter up, because if you have a letter, or let's say a 5-page letter, and it's paragraph after paragraph, the agent is not going to have the time or the patience to read it. So we want to make sure it's as clear, concise, and organized as possible as well.
I think it's a great experience to try and look at it from the perspective of the visa officer working on your PR file. They are assessed on performance, and how is their performance measured? By how many applicants they can review in a day.
Exactly.
So they spend just a couple minutes per application. If you make it complicated for them, they're just gonna skim through it, refuse it, or return your application, mark it as incomplete, and that's definitely what you don't want to happen.
Exactly, and I also find too from experience that when we're dealing with PR applications, the agents, they tend not to send letters or request letters where they're asking you for explanations, additional documents, something to help them feel more comfortable about approving your application. They're likely to just make a decision and refuse your application. With study permits and work permits, I do see that more often, those request letters coming in. So with PR especially, it's very important that this is your one chance. You got to make sure that application is as good as it can be. Perfect is obviously a very incredibly high standard to reach, but very, very close to that.
You, very specific in numbers, and you like to analyze data. As an immigration lawyer, what can an immigrant do to best prepare for PR in 2024? Maybe that's choosing a specific career to pursue or moving to a specific province to focus on the PNP. What would you say?
You got to do your homework. It's not just a matter of becoming eligible for express entry and waiting for your invite. So one thing I would do is really understand the new industry-specific draws, right? Which industries are they targeting? Which knock codes are they targeting? Which skill sets like French speaking are they targeting? Number one. Second, especially if you feel like you don't fit under one of those 6, start doing your homework on PNPs, right? Start looking into the different provinces, probably first the province that you currently live in. Look at all the different streams of each province. Might you be eligible for any? Are you maybe 1 or 2 requirements away from being eligible for 1 or 2 of them? Do it early rather than later, because the last thing you want is to be coming up on the expiration of a PGWP without any options.
If you're not completely sure about how to get PR, one of the best investments you can make is to book a PR strategy session with Erica. It's the first link in the description that can open many doors for you. Let me know in the comments what topics I should cover more in the new year, and I'll see you in the next video.